Hi, and thank you for joining us today. I am here with UC Berkeley Haas School of Business, Professor Drew Isaacs. Drew, thanks for joining me today.
It's great to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
So I know that you focus a lot specifically on climate change, and that you teach undergrad, graduate, and then also do a lot of executive education as well. Can you tell me a little bit about the types of topics that are relevant to business leaders today around climate change?
We start all of my classes, undergraduate, graduate, and executive level, with a short primer on exactly what climate change is. Because what I find is folks come into a discussion about climate change interested, eager to learn more, but at very different levels of understanding. And it's not a science class exactly, but it's like a crash course on what you really need to know about climate change. And that's about 20% or so of the class. The remaining 80% is actually the hard part, which is, what do we do about this problem? What are the options that companies have? It goes far beyond issues of just, okay, it would be good if we could reduce fossil fuel use, but that's a very, very tall order for lots of industries, lots of companies, lots of individuals. So we look broadly at what the issues of climate change mean for companies' relationship with their customers, particularly now with millennials, but even more so Gen Z, folks in their, say, early 20s. They want to understand what companies are doing about climate change, and they're able to see through greenwashing pretty well. That's a quick thumbnail there, but we focus on a lot of the issues that are tangible, that are actionable, that companies can actually do to address climate change.
I'm curious, what are sort of your recommendations for senior finance or operations leaders who are trying to just understand, how do I start? I know this is a goal that I need to get to, but how do I even think about this in the context of my business function?
It strikes me that not just finance, but leadership generally is dealing with so many, not challenges anymore, just uncertainties that are coming at us, things that we didn't train for. You can get a PhD in finance and never have worried about greenhouse gases or pandemics, or the kinds of things that are, I don't want to say day to day, but they're ongoing, persistent challenges. It's almost like finance executives now are living the lives of cybersecurity professionals, where you just have to worry about things that are unknown unknowns, and yet be prepared for them. So what I would say is, for finance leadership now, the mental models that we want to move towards are ones that incorporate uncertainty and not try to drive towards absolute certainty with things, which is what we're trained to do as business professionals, to take uncertainty and find and conjure certainty out of that. You can't. That was then. And the now that we're in is new uncertainties coming at us all the time. So this means that the kinds of skills that we might want to emphasize are things related to scenario planning or modeling uncertainties. Are these scenarios ones that we don't need to worry about? Can we set them aside for now and treat things like scenario planning as an ongoing, continuous exercise rather than something you do once a year?
I think within COVID, we know that there's been a lot of accelerations of change. And one of the things that we've seen is that the best practices of yesterday are no longer effective today. That companies really sort of need to redefine what best looks like. And I think a great example of that is with supply chain, where a lot of businesses really focus on having just-in-time inventory. But then when we had issues with supply chain, then we end up having shortages because there isn't any resilience built into the supply chain. Are there other examples or things that you see that are best practices from the past that are just not going to carry forward and really serve our business leaders in the future?
I would say I totally endorse, support, wish to emphasize what you just said, that there's practices in the past that were norms that are now not going to work for us. This is particularly true when people are involved. It's particularly true when people and capital are involved, which is pretty much everything. But it's certainly true where people are involved in terms of workflows and work practices. I made a comment the other day in a meeting. Well, when we get back to the office, and it was an anachronism. It was like, and people sort of stopped and said, "What do you mean back? And what do you mean by office?" It's very, so simple conversations turn into these philosophical questions of what do you mean by the office anyways? And I'll also take your idea and raise you 10, because it's not just that we're going to be we have moved away from the norms of the past. It's that the pandemic has taught us some new skills and got us used to the idea of interacting in kind of new ways with employees, with customers, with clients. It used to be that if you were based here in California and you had a prospect in Chicago, you'd say, I'm going to fly to Chicago. I'll come in the night before and stay at O'Hare, and I'll be in your office at 9 a.m. Well, the reaction to that now is, please don't. Do me a favor, don't come to my office. So it's something that would have been seen as generous and giving in the past is now seen as antisocial in some way. I'm probably exaggerating a bit. Certainly I'm exaggerating a bit, but not entirely. And so we've actually had the opportunity, and I think we have started to become successful at learning from this new world that we're in and applying these things. I'll give one anecdote along these lines. A company I work with in Tokyo, Japan, has probably the most expensive address in Tokyo. It's in Marunouchi, which is directly in front of Tokyo Station. Incredibly expensive real estate. 8 floors of a building. They're getting rid of 6 of the floors and keeping 2. And both of the 2 floors are for the purpose of company get-togethers when that is possible, when it's allowed by the authorities and so on. In other words, sort of like a party space, social space, but not cubicles and not the seas of open desks that are typical in Japanese businesses. So I can't imagine them at 5 years in the future then releasing their 6 floors of expensive real estate that they gave up. It seems unlikely.
One of the things I think is really interesting is this relationship between humans and technology. Having worked around innovation myself for a long time, I know that timing in many instances is everything. And we have a lot of great technologies coming out, a lot of emerging technologies. How do you see these technologies being able to help solve some of these problems that we've had in the past, or at least help contribute to moving them forward?
On the subject of where technology is going to take us, I would say it's more about where we want to take technology. If anything, I hope we've become wiser as a result of this pandemic, valuing how we spend our time, what we spend it doing, both on the personal front and on the work front, if you can find any line between personal and work anymore, whatever that is, if there's a line. That wisdom that I hope we've gathered over these couple of years will make us fussier about what technologies we want to adopt. The transition of the last 20 or 30 years is such that businesses fundamentally are not leaders in technology. It's really shifted to a consumer space. Even Silicon Valley, when I arrived here, it was all B2B. It's still largely B2B, but there's a consumer-facing element that I think is leading the charge. It's redefining our world. And businesses can pick and choose from those technologies that seem to make sense for that business. But I think it's also fundamentally why the pace of technology is so much faster. It's not your imagination. The pace of development of technology is way faster because technologies take root in the consumer domain and at a later time are adopted in the business domain. Now, I don't know if I've answered your question.
Yeah, that's a great answer.
Okay.
No, that's great. Disasters are also opportunities. And this is giving us a chance to sort of rethink how we do business. And a lot of companies are looking at new business models. Seems like around climate change, there's going to be a lot of opportunities for companies. Are there certain areas that you think, certain sectors or certain evolutions within current companies that are going to be opportunities for them to sort of capture additional value?
I think we are at like minute one of day one of year one for large corporations to really get their hands around what climate change means in terms of risk to the business and also in terms of opportunities. For climate change, it's trickier because the main impact isn't people, living in prosperous parts of the world in the present. It's everybody in the present, in the future, for many generations ahead. And so to create a value proposition and a business model, for that matter, around helping people you'll never meet, who will never be your customers directly, is a tall order. There are moral arguments that can be made, but there's also very good capitalist arguments that can be made. Larry Fink, in his newsletter from BlackRock, which he issues every January at about this time, makes the point that this is not about woke capitalism. This is about capitalism, plain old capitalism. That good business depends on having customers and partners who believe in you and what you're doing, and that you believe in what you're doing. And recruiting and retaining employees depends on a company ethos that takes the high ground in terms of climate sustainability. So I think the opportunities are quite profound for companies to differentiate themselves, whether they're in software or manufacturing or logistics. I don't think it matters. If you're a corporation, you have a carbon footprint, and it's measurable. And we understand what the trends are. Is it getting bigger or smaller? What are the things we can do about it? It's not that there's these 5 easy steps and problem solved. It's more like a few dozen hard steps. Many people point that out. It's not a revelation that this is tough. Climate is a tough problem to solve, but it's eminently addressable.
I think it's interesting because in the past, you can really only track what you can measure. And so the decisions that get made are the decisions around what can you quantify. And I think we've been pretty limited with that in the past. And it seems like there's a lot of opportunity with new technologies that are allowing us to get a more comprehensive picture of the situation. It gives us an opportunity to see a more holistic view of the business. And I think that really demonstrates that with a lot of companies who are innovative, you really can do well by doing good. So being able to have a clearer picture allows you to make business decisions that aren't just short-term or aren't just over-indexed on certain metrics, but allows you to see something that's more comprehensive and really see sort of the interconnectivity between the environment and the talent and the technology in many instances is tying all of that together and really providing that visibility to business professionals and leadership. What's your perspective on that?
If you visualize your competitors, like every company has competitors. It's like, okay, what are my competitors doing? In the context of sustainability and climate change, and I'm going to answer your question in that context. Either your company is going to define for your industry what the norms are going to be, or your competitor is going to do it for you. And it's pretty easy to guess which of those is better. You want to be the one defining what progress looks like in your industry. Because if you don't, it's going to be defined for you. An even better way is to create a consortium of, in effect, a third-party consortium that will set what those standards are going to be and have a third party do assessments of, are we making progress? Are we headed in the right direction? But at a minimum, you don't want your strategy defined by your competitor, and that's exactly what will happen if you don't move pretty quickly on these topics of sustainability.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you so much. It was great to chat with you today.
Thanks so much for your time. It's been a pleasure.